Hello, and welcome to another exciting edition of After Effects Lectures by Todd Randall. Tonight we are continuing to work on our Deja Vu project. We are going to use Mocha to
Alpha, take one, Mark.
track and key and matte this shot right here. So what's happening in this shot is our actor Meredith is basically, there's Karn, who is like a graphical or holographic dude that's standing in front of her, and she's coming back from the past out of the time machine, which is the green box inside this shot. The green hexagon, I should say. And we need to get, number one, we need to key this cleanly, and number two, we need to learn how to use Mocha to track and create mats for this so that we can get a really, really nice clean key. So some of this is going to be repetitive, building off of what we've done in the last couple weeks, and some of this is going to be new. So the way I'd like to start is, first and foremost, make sure you're working in 32 bits per channel. So go down here on the bottom and set this to 32 bits per channel. Mine is already set to 32 bits per channel. It's basically the bit depth that we'll be working in. This does a couple things. It allows After Effects to take a better look at all the colors in your shot. And it's going to do things like run 32-bit plugins like Keylight and other effects that we're using with better color depth, and it's going to give us cleaner renders overall once this is all done. It also does increase your render times. So just note that if you're going to render at 32 bits per channel, be ready to let your computer chug away for a while. It's the way it's going to be. Go ahead and click OK, and then let's go back into our composition. Let's just take this shot first, double click on it, and let's find a good in and out to start on. We obviously don't need Connor with the slate at the front end. I'm just going to basically set this up so that it's just before. I know that it's what's supposed to happen here is the time pod pops back into the shot, which we have a plate for. And then Karn, who's standing kind of in the foreground over here, it says, where's DW, the other character? And she's pissed off, so she kind of swats at him, and her arm is supposed to like pass through Karn as a hologram and like disrupt his matrix or whatever, and she leaves frame. So I'm gonna kind of like set my ins and my outs right here. So I have an out set at 4:39:02:14, and I'm gonna back up just to before where she kind of walks off. I'm gonna back up just a couple seconds previous. We'll go at like 52 seconds. This will give us basically time to have the time pod pop in and the doors open, and then we see Meredith standing there inside the time pod. That's farther down the line before we start doing 3D stuff with the time pod. Right now we need to key all this out, clean it up, make it look good, and we're going to do that using Mocha. All right, so we've got our ins and our outs set. I'm going to go ahead and grab my shot, pull it onto a new composition, and that gives us the proper aspect ratio. It gives us the proper settings for the video, all that good stuff. And we're going to start working on this. So the repetitive part of this is the Keylight part. So a couple things that I'm going to do. I'm going to make one version of this video that says original, and I'm going to make a copy that says key matte. And then what we're going to do is we're going to start working our key matte. So let's get in there, and we'll add Keylight to it, and we'll start here. I said to a few of you in class, as I looked at some of your previous shots, that think of these shots as like a drawing, right? When you draw a drawing, you don't start drawing the detail first. Go ahead, Adam.
Should I drag MOV?
Okay, so I went around, I looked at some of the students' shots in here, and we were kind of like talking about some settings inside of Keylight. So one of the things to keep in mind here is you want to work these green screen keys. You want to work these green screen keys kind of like you do a drawing, right? Like when you do a drawing, you don't start drawing the detail right away. You need to lay the whole thing out first, right? You do big broad strokes, rough out where all the shapes are, the composition, etc., etc. Like if you're drawing a face, the face would just be a circle, right? And as you get all the proportions and everything kind of set out, then you start going in and refining your detail, and you refine and you refine and you refine until you have a finished piece, right? And that's kind of how you need to think of these shots. So when we're doing our keying and our matting, think of it, start rough, and then go in and work the details. And that's how we're going to approach this. So we've got our key mat layer, and we're going to put key light on it. So key light 1.2, and let's go ahead and drop key light onto our composition. And then, as we've done in the past, we're going to go ahead and we're going to grab the green that we are keying from Meredith, and we're going to go ahead and set this to screen matte. Because what we're trying to do here is we're trying to get just a really good, clean, black and white matte. That is the goal of our key. So we've got our black and white matte looking good here. Let's do this. Let's go to our key matte layer and let's right click and pre-compose it. And we're going to call this key matte comp. And we're going to move all the attributes to new composition. And we're going to click OK. So all that does is it buries that layer in a composition that we can go in and we can start tweaking on now. So I'm going to double click my key matte composition, and that's going to bring up the key matte composition. Now we can start refining our key matte. So when we're working with our key mattes, again, one of the things you want to keep in mind is start with subtle changes, right? So most of us know that when we key stuff, we need to use the clip black and clip white because we're using this black and white method. We make a really solid matte, and then we use that matte and a Luma track matte on top of it to give us our keyed footage. So one of the things that I've said too is like clip as little as humanly possible, right? So we only want to clip a little bit. I'm going to start with a clipping the black at 15 and clipping the white at like 85 to 90. So it just clips out a little bit. It doesn't get rid of all the detail everywhere, and then you can kind of push it a little bit more from there. I'm also going to set the replace method to source. It softens up the edges and things like that on some of these keys and just makes things a little nicer. All right, so now what we're going to do is we'll push it just a little farther. So I'm still seeing a little bit of the shadow noise from behind Meredith there, so I'm going to push this clip up just a little bit higher. Let's try like 25. And it's gotten rid of most of the noise. And because of how we're going to approach this with Mocha, I'm going to clip this just very, very little. Like I'm pretty happy with where we're at right now. So in terms of like doing our big broad strokes, let's start with our big broad strokes. So I'm going to scrub across this real quick. I'm going to go in like half resolution and scrub across this. Kind of see where the motion is, right? So most of the motion outside of this box, or this hexagon, whatever you want to call it, happens only on the last third of our image, right? Or of our shot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a garbage mat around this box that's going to give us clean white borders all the way up until this point. So I'm going to make a new layer solid. It's going to be white, and we're going to call this outer garbage mat. And we're going to make sure it is indeed full on white, and it is, and we're going to click OK. And we're going to go in and we're going to make a mask for this, just like we've done before. So let's go ahead. We're going to drop the opacity a little bit so we can see our whole shot. And all I'm really going to do for this is I'm just going to draw this mat like right around the borders of our hexagon. And I'm using as few points as possible. And that's something that I've been telling you guys too, is like use as few points as possible. It keeps things a lot more simple. And if you need to adjust, like if the shot was moving or had handheld motion to it or something like that, you could adjust it a little bit. So I'm actually going to keep this mat just a hair inside the border of our hexagon. Just a hair. And this doesn't move, so that's really nice. It doesn't move. We don't have to do any keyframing on it, which is super duper. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and crank this up, and we've got a problem. It's matting the wrong part of the shot. So I'm going to go into my mask, and I'm going to invert it so that it becomes a garbage mat for the exterior of the shot. So let's take a look at what that actually does. So we go back over to our shot, and we are on our original footage, and we set our track matte to Luma matte. You're going to start seeing progress on your key work. The other thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a spill suppressor to it. So advanced spill suppressor is what I'm going to add to this. It'll get rid of all the green cast. I'm just going to leave that in its standard settings for right now. We'll come back and reset those settings a little bit and go to ultra settings as we get closer to finishing this shot. Okay, so that's one broad stroke. Let's go back into our key mat composition. And then what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate this. Well, first we're going to cut this. So right here we know that Meredith leaves the box. So when she leaves the box, actually we don't need to worry about her leaving the box. That's totally fine. That'll work just peachy keen for us. Because once we get a 3D layer back there. So here's the rub, and this is why we're going to do this in Mocha. What's going to happen, what's going to go behind her is actually going to overlap the outside of this green screen key, right? So we're going to have to do a pretty precise rotoscope on Meredith to make it so that she doesn't key underneath that layer that we want to put behind her, right? So when we get this final shot, we want there to be the time pod behind her, and when she walks outside the green screen, whatever overlap there is for the time pod, we need to roto that. So we're basically going to rotoscope almost all of Meredith. We're going to do an interior roto on her just after she starts moving, and we're going to use Mocha to lay out the masks for all that stuff and make it nice and clean so that when she walks out of frame, we don't have any funkiness happening with the out of bounds areas where the green screen is. Okay, so again, I got my key mat, I've got my white garbage mat. What I'm going to do here is just before she leaves. Oh, I'm thinking about this. I'm like, do I need to do this? No, I don't. We can just leave that garbage mat right where it sits. So let's leave the garbage mat right where it sits. All right, so the next thing we need to do is we need to do a little bit of detail. We got all these markers over here on the background. We're going to go ahead and make a small black layer mask for those. So let's do that next. So layer, new, solid. We're going to call this track marker mat. And this needs to be black. And we're going to click OK. And now we've got our track mat for the black area. And we're just going to reduce the opacity a little bit so we can see where we need to draw in our mask. And this one can be very, very simple, again, like the other one. There we go. If I turn that up to 100%, now we're starting to really clean up our mat a little bit. If we go back and we look at what we got, now we don't have track markers in there anymore. Beautiful. We're rocking and rolling here. Okay. Is everybody ready for Mocha? All right. Let's give it a shot, shall we? So, let's take our original footage layer. Let's duplicate it. And then let's call this Mocha Meredith interior mat. So Mocha needs the footage to work off of. We can't track our object if we don't have the footage. So we can't put Mocha on an adjustment layer. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move this layer to the top of my layer stack. So that Mocha layer is going to go on the very top, and we don't need key light on it. So let's delete key light off of it, because the only thing we're going to do with this Mocha layer is we're just going to use the mats or masks that we create inside of Mocha to mat out the inside of Meredith as she moves across the screen. Everybody with me? You guys ready?
Which one did you bring in? Is another. Which one did you bring in?
Okay, so we are going to start tracking and masking Meredith inside of Mocha. All right, so we're going to click on the Mocha Meredith interior matte layer. And we are going to go up to animation, and we are going to say track in Boris Effects Mocha. And click OK. And then what that does is it's going to add Mocha as a plugin. So here's the cool thing about After Effects 2019. In 2019, they finally made Mocha an interior part of After Effects, which makes it way easier to work with and a whole lot easier to actually use functionally on shots. In the past, there was a whole lot of rigmarole that you needed to do to make stuff actually work correctly inside of Mocha. Now it should be a whole lot easier to use. So once you have that Mocha plugin put on there, go ahead and click on Okay, cancel that. So it's asking me for full resolution media. So let's set our resolution to full first before we go ahead and click on the little Mocha button. So when we click on the little Mocha button, it's going to open the Mocha interface for us.
It says start register. Yeah.
Register later.
Yeah, just say register later. And then you should see your shot. And the nice thing now is it gives you your ins and your outs, which is great. You only really see what you need to see, whereas in the past it used to show you the whole shot. Now it just shows you what you need. Go ahead, Riley.
How did you get the Mocha?
So to get to Mocha, you are going to click on the little Mocha button in the effects panel. So you got to go animation, track and Boris Effects Mocha, and then you click on the little Mocha button. I'm looking at your screen right now to just see where things are at. You're in Mocha. This is the interface. It's the simplified interface. There's two different modes that you can look at this in. We're going to use the simplified interface and see how it rolls. If we need to get into the more advanced stuff, we will. But you should be able to keep all of your masks and mats pretty straight right here in the simplified interface. When you create masks inside of Mocha, they're going to end up over here as layers, and you can adjust colors and things like that and their visibilities. And we're going to break this down into kind of simple parts of this character, right? So instead of trying to do the whole body, we're going to start with like the head. And then we're going to do the neck, and then we're going to do the torso, and then we're going to do the arms, or even the upper arm and the forearm and the hand, right? We're going to break it down into small chunks, and we're going to work through those small chunks one at a time. Then when we go back into After Effects, it will come in as one solid white mat that is going to be perfect and will work fantastically for what we're trying to do. We might also need to get into like playing with some feathering and things like that on some of these surfaces, or some motion blur that we can add to Mocha when we're back in After Effects with our mats. Okay, so let's start simply with just her head, and we're gonna be really kind of like careful with how we're making these masks. We're gonna get right down into the nitty gritty. We're gonna get super detailed, and we're gonna keep these masks really tight to the edges, because what we want to do is when she leaves our green screen, we want her, basically her mat or her key, to be good enough where we can plop a 3D object in the background behind her and it'll look like she's standing on a green screen for the whole doggone shot. Like, that's the goal here. Okay, so let's get started. Let's go up and grab the X-Spline tool. This is the X-Spline tool right here. Go ahead and click on that bad boy, and we're going to get in nice and close. So if you want to zoom in and zoom out, you hold the Z key, right? Hold the Z key, and you can zoom in and zoom out. If you click the middle mouse button, it gives you the hand tool, and you can move your shot around within your frame to adjust where you're looking at when you create these masks. Does that make sense to everyone? Cool beans. So let's grab the X-Spline tool, and I'm going to go in, and I think I'm going to just start on her chin down here, and I'm just going to create a nice clean mask around her face. And you'll notice I'm getting like really close to the edges. I'm going to incorporate, I don't even know if I want to incorporate the ears into this right now. I think I might want to do the ears later. So I'm just going to go around her face proper. And I'm just clicking. I'm not clicking and dragging. And I'm just going to do her face. I'm not even doing her hair. I'm just going to do her face. This is all I'm doing. We're going to break it down into small chunks. We're going to work through the small chunks one at a time, and we're going to try to get a nice, clean mat that is dang near pixel perfect. Beautiful. So once you've got your mask completed, right click and it will close the layer. And then what we're going to do is we're going to name our layer. So in the upper left hand corner, I'm going to double click where it says layer 1, and I'm going to say Meredith face. And that's our layer. Is everybody with me? Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to soften up the corners on my mask. So one of the things you can do is you can click on these handles, and it will soften these handles up a little bit. It'll round those corners off. It's kind of like when you click and drag inside of the spline tool or the mask tool inside of After Effects. So we don't have to do every single one of these. If you want to do all of them and give them all a little softness, you can hit select all, and you can just soften up all of those corners a little bit, and it'll give you a nice, clean looking selection. Like so. Nice, soft face track. There we go. We're looking good. Okay, so now we want to take and we want to track this mask forward in time. And then we're going to try to track the whole thing, and then we're going to go back and we're going to refine it, right? So again, we're starting with broad strokes, and we're going to work down and refine. So how do we track forward? All right, well, first, make sure that you have your layer selected. So make sure Meredith face is selected. Everything's looking good. You have a good pixel perfect mask. And what we're going to do is we're going to start to track forward. So you can see over here on the left-hand side, you've got your track forward, track backward, and stop buttons. We're going to go ahead and start at the very beginning, which should be frame 168. And we're going to start to track forward. So here we go. Tracking forward. And this might take a little bit of time, so I am going to pause. Things get freaky or funky while this thing is tracking. You can always stop it and back up, and you can refine it. So right now she's holding pretty still. She's not moving too much, and we're just going to let this thing fire off frames and move through. And if we need to stop, we will. Stopped, and I zoomed out a little bit. I know she's going to be moving across the frame this way, and I just want to kind of pay attention to where I'm at with my track and make sure that things are on the up and up. So I'm going to go ahead and start tracking forward again. When you get to the end of the shot where her face is almost completely off screen, it doesn't have any more pixels to work off of. So you have to kind of do this part manually. So I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to adjust my matte a little bit, or my selection, I should say. Oh, here, I'm trying to zoom in, and I'm using the wrong button. All right, so that's looking pretty good. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna back up, and now we're gonna start refining this. So what you can do now is, like, your tracking's basically done. All the tracking data's there. Like, all this blue on this, like, little ribbon on top of the timeline down below, that's all stuff that's been tracked. Everything after that has not been tracked. So there was this part, like, once we run out of pixels for our masks, we kind of got to go and do it. One by one, right? And it seems like she just moves from here all the way off the screen. So if we, like, select our whole selection and just have it move off screen, we should be in pretty good shape. There we go. And now we start the refining process. So the cool thing about Mocha is it looks at the whole track and all of the data that you've done for refine points and takes it all into account when you refine. So don't start little. Again, start with broad strokes, right? So, like, you can see that the mask is kind of off right here. I'm going to kind of actually split this and back up a little bit more and kind of adjust this matte before that point. And it may end up that in certain areas, you won't have to do too much adjusting if you just do the broad strokes first. I'm going to come in, do our work around her face a little bit, fix this up just a hair, and then we're going to keep on trucking. It's done a damn good job with the track. There's a few places we need to fix, like right here. This is clearly off, so we can adjust that a little bit. Oops. Adjust these a little bit. Oh, I keep pushing the wrong button. Looks pretty good. So you'll notice when I made that adjustment, it takes that adjustment into account on all the in-between frames as well. That's one of the things that rocks about Mocha. After Effects doesn't really do that, which is why Mocha's great for doing tracking and matting selections. All right, and then I think this is all probably pretty solid. So I'm going to focus really on this last part where she starts moving in big movements. And I'm just gonna stay in close on the face and just check this as we kind of scroll. So when I'm moving through frames, all I'm doing is rotating the middle mouse wheel. So I'm rotating the middle mouse wheel down to move forward in frames, and I'm just kind of watching this mat to make sure that things are kind of staying true to where her face is. And again, if you have blurry areas like this, just split the blurry area. I'm gonna fix this up a little bit over on her ear and her face. And then I'm gonna fix up here by her forehead a little bit. And that should do a pretty good job. And I'm gonna scroll my mouse a little more. I'm just kind of checking these blurry areas over here to make sure that we're kind of keeping this in the middle of the blurry area. We'll make some additional adjustments over here. Just keep this nice and smooth. Zoom out a little bit so I can see where her face is going, and I'm just rolling the middle mouse button down, and if I need to make any additional adjustments, I will. This looks like I can adjust this just a hair. Looks really good. And I'm going to adjust these two over here just a little bit. We'll kind of scrub over here and fix up her face as she's leaving the frame. So we're losing a bunch of data with our mat over here. Move this around a little bit. This around a little bit. That all looks good there. Just kind of want to watch this side of her face and make sure that we're not cutting off a lot of it. It's pretty good. Pretty good, pretty good. I'm going to cruise down a few more frames. And I'm going to take this whole side and just adjust it over. Adjust this over. Adjust these in. Groovy. That's solid. Okay. So there we go. Her face. Ooh, wait. Okay, it's just because I was missing things. All right, so her face is looking like it's got a nice track on it. Deselect here. And I think, are there options here for like... Let's go ahead and save this project too. So go File, Save. You want to save after you get stuff kind of dialed in here, so you don't lose any of your progress. All right, and then let's go ahead and start working the rest of this track. So we've got her face. That's done. Let's go back to the beginning, and let's do her hair. So let's go in, make one around her hair. And then we'll do the ears and we'll do the neck, and then we'll see if we can't maybe just do the torso as one big deal. We'll just start making with the detailed stuff so you guys can learn kind of how this works. So this is the same process. So we get in there, grab the X-spline tool. I'm in nice and close here, and I'm just gonna draw a nice little X-spline right around where her hair is, and I'm gonna leave that little curly Q out. Just gonna try to keep this nice and tight around the hair area. And I'm gonna like let it overlap with the previous mask a little bit. That's fine. The other thing you can do to kind of differentiate things, so I'm going to say this is the hair, is you can change the mask color. So if you click on the little mask box in the layer, you can pick a different color for the hair. So like I'm going to just pick like a bright orange color for the hair. Oh, maybe something a little more visible than that. How about a purple or a dark blue? There we go. That'll work. And I'm going to click OK. So now you can just differentiate your masks out a little bit by using that tool. All right, and I'm going to select all of my nodes, and I'm just going to soften them up a little bit so we get nice, smooth corners on everything. I'm going to zoom in here just a little bit more and make some adjustments on this initial shape. Just adjusting, and I am like really way down to like the pixel level here is what I'm looking at. If you see, so like this spot right here on her hair where she's kind of got this little corner, if you need to pull your corners in a little tighter, you can just grab this handle and you can pull it all the way to a 90-degree corner, or you can increase the sharpness of the corners by just grabbing those handles and pulling on those handles a little bit. This is looking pretty decent. I'm being kind of overly precise with where I'm putting this mask, but I think that's okay. All right, so it looks like I started one frame early. Yeah, I did. So I'm gonna move to, I'm gonna just track this one track frame backwards and it'll track it in. Then I can move forward and start tracking forward. And I'm gonna pause this part and get through this whole track. It got most of this tracked out. I did stop and do a couple of keys in the middle. Now we're just gonna go in and kind of refine this whole thing. I'm gonna select all the keys and just kind of readjust the whole track to like her main body of hair right there. And then I'm gonna go in and just pay kind of a little closer attention to areas like this on the side where you can see that it's pretty tight to her face because her head is rotated a little bit. And we're just gonna try to clean this up as much as possible. Looks pretty good. I'm gonna move forward a couple frames here and adjust again. Just working to keep this as precise as possible. You know, so there's some spots like this little curl of hair right here. Like we might need to come in and do some additional refinement on some of these areas once we kind of see where we're at with everything down the line. And I'm gonna move the whole doggone thing again. And just go in and make some spot adjustments here. Just trying to keep this as precise as I can because she's now off the screen. This is where it counts. So this is where you want to spend the time and get it right. Okay, and you might have, you know, you might have a keyframe for every frame here if you really need to. Yep, we have done that before. But this is, again, this is the part that counts. This is the time when you take this time matters. Okay, I'm thinking we're gonna be okay now. Okay, now she's leaving frame, so I'm gonna kind of go through and just do a select all and get this super close. Her hair is kind of like blended see-through right here, so we will probably need to adjust a little bit for that. But if I go ahead and I kind of cruise through this now and look at it, pretty good. Making some more minor adjustments here. Adding some additional keys, moving through. And then I'm going to do a select all and kind of move this whole darn thing over here. And then we're going to move the mask entirely off the frame. I'm going to kind of scrub backwards here and just look and see where we're at. Overall, we're in pretty good shape. Cool. Okay, so now let's just let's test what we have. So let's go File, Save. And then let's go ahead and just close this window, and it'll bring us right back into After Effects. And it should give us our Mocha mats. All right, so if we want to see what our mats look like, what we got to do is we have to take this layer, and we have to say Matte, View Matte. And now what it's going to do is it's just going to show this as a black and white matte. And we want it to be on all visible layers. And what we honestly probably need to do with this is separate this from our original key matte. Because right now, like, we have stuff that we've done in the background, right? And Mocha is giving us all the visible shapes. And I'm wondering if there is an option. I wonder if we go Mode, Screen. Ooh, if we use the Screen mode type, it will leave the white matte and get rid of all the black for us. So that's what we want to do. We're going to set our mode to Screen on this layer. Here's what it looked like before. And here's what it looks like after we set the mode to Screen. It gets rid of all the black and leaves just the white areas. So the part now that I'm gonna find is pretty interesting here. So we have some options. We can do a couple things here, and I think ultimately this is the way that it will end up working. Instead of screening this, we'll leave this as normal. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna cut this layer. So I'm gonna hit Command X to cut it. So we have our black and white matte. I'm gonna go back up to the original footage, and I'm actually gonna paste this layer. I'm going to make a copy of the original, and I'm going to take this original and this Mocha matte layer, and I'm going to right-click, pre-comp it, and I'm going to call this Meredith Only. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a layer that is specifically just Meredith. So we're cutting away everything around Meredith, and we're just seeing our Meredith layer. That way we can place our 3D model of our time pod in between the background and the foreground.
Did you just copy that matte?
I copied, so we'll step back here. Ready? So here are the steps. I have the Meredith interior matte. What I did is I hit Command X to cut it, right? So I'm cutting it from this layer stack. Cut. Now we just have our key light and our garbage matte. That's all we have here. Then I'm going back to the original footage layer where we're doing all of our final comping, and I'm pasting that layer in, right? Then I'm taking the original footage, duplicating it, which pops up the original two right below where we want to be. And I'm going to take these two layers and I'm going to pre-compose them. And I'm going to call this Meredith Only. What happened to the original matte? It's still there. So here's what we need to do. The garbage mats are still there. I'm going to go into my Meredith Only layer. And I'm going to shut off my Meredith track, and you can see now we just have Meredith's head and hair. That's it. That's all we have. Right? So when we go back up the chain, we're going to have a very clean Meredith interior. Ultimately, when we get through all of this, and if we shut off these other layers, you should only see Meredith's body once we go through this whole process, right? So then now we can put whatever the hell we want behind her, and it's going to work. It's going to look clean. So let's try a couple other things. Let's go over to where she's actually moving with pretty good haste, like right here where we can see these really solid lines where we need those blurry edges. And let's go into our Meredith only and our Meredith matte interior, and let's turn on our motion blur and see if this will actually motion blur. Maybe it won't. Yes.
So how did you get from the screen matte look to the her face paste on?
Okay, I'm gonna pause this for a second.
Sorry.
No, that's all right, dude. No. I have learned some more things about tracking and rotoscoping inside of Mocha, which are going to come in really handy. And it's a good thing we're covering this now, and that this is only practice. And we're going to start implementing this as we go. So I want everybody to switch from Essentials to Classic View. It's going to give you a lot more parameters to look at. Don't get scared. A lot of this stuff we don't have to worry about quite yet, but there's some things that I want to show you so that you can see how to make stuff work. All right, so one of the things that we've got going on with Meredith is, will this show me, like, what did she do to do that thing where I can see? Okay, no, I don't want to do that. Okay, I'm screwing all this up now. Okay, let me pause this for a second. That I'm looking at here. So I wanted to figure out how we can account for the motion blur on the edge of her face as we're rotoscoping her as she's leaving the green screen and moving across the screen. We've got this large amount of motion blur that we need to deal with. And the way that we do that is we do that with this white arrow button over here, right? We can control different sections of the layer and its nodes by changing the mode in which we're working, right? So if you click on the white arrow and you start adjusting the edges over here, you'll start to be able to see the motion blur. So like, I'm gonna zoom in a little closer over here. So you can see I've made it so that I can see the edge mats. How the hell did I just do that? What did I click? I don't even remember. Layer mats right here. So if you click show layer mats, you'll actually be able to see the outline of your layer mat. And I'm wondering if I change this to like 0.25, yeah, it'll defocus it a little bit. Perfect. All right. I am also learning Mocha as we go, so bear with me, folks. Here we go. All right. So if you set your motion or use your white little picker over here and you set it to pick edge, you can feather the edges out on any of the nodes one by one, right? So in places where there's not a lot of motion blur, you can feather the edges out for your keyframes, and you can get your motion blur perfect.
How did you do that again?
So you're going to the white arrow, upper left-hand corner, click and hold, and then pick edge. So you want it in E mode is basically what you want, right? And then you can go in and you can adjust your edges for motion blur, which is really nice. And in certain places like her ear, where we don't really need a lot of motion blur, we don't have to worry about it too much. Then when you save it and you go back over into After Effects, that motion blur is going to get added into the matte, right? So when she's walking across the screen and we see those big motion blurred soft edges, we can make those soft edges appear proper so they're not these just hard cut edges like her hair is right now. The unfortunate part is, because I'm teaching you this right now and we did all this keyframing work, you have to go in and you have to keyframe it. So as we move forward, we're going to start working with the edges on all the remaining parts of Meredith's mask, so we can go back and refine and account for the motion blur around her face and stuff like that, so we can get a good solid roto. I can see that Riley is already implementing said tools. Way to go, buddy. I am looking at your screen, right? Number 10. Yes, I am. All right. So I'm going to go back into Mocha over here, and I'm just going to play around with the edge matting. So if we're going to work your edge mats a little bit, so the way that I turned on the mats was right here, this little button right here, Show Layer Mats. If you turn on Show Layer Mats and you click on a layer, you will see the layer plus the edges that you want to see around it. Now you'll notice that we're not seeing the top of her head, which is okay because we have her hair selection there. If we click the hair selection, we will see that matte. Right? Makes sense to everyone? Okay, cool beans. So let's do this. I'm going to pause the lecture, go back into your hair and your face mats, And let's go ahead and do the edge work we need to do and keyframe that out before we start moving forward. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move to the end of my track, and I'm going to work from the end of the track backwards. So I've got this mask right here, and if I click up a layer, you can see we've got all kinds of edge pixel stuff we need to deal with. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to blur this out pretty substantially, and I'm in edge mode. Remember, white arrow, click the edge mode. You want edge mode.
And the hair doesn't need to be done though? Except for...
The hair, yeah, you will need to do it on the hair. I haven't done any of it on the hair yet, so that's what I'm working right now. And you'll notice that, like, it's going to account for some of this stuff if we fix the edges. Yep, and I've already done a little bit of this work while you guys were on break. I'm going in and I'm just refining my edges. And I'm just going frame by frame. I mean, the frames that count are the ones kind of at the end here. So you can see this frame has a bunch of edge blending on it. This frame does not. So it's definitely something we want to integrate from the beginning. So the way that I would suggest doing this is we start the track at the very front, run the track all the way to the back end of the shot, and set all of your edge settings at the end and the beginning. And then we go back in and we refine the matte over time. You can also do the same thing you did before. Like if you have a bunch of edges where you need to soften them out, you can select a bunch of edges at once and adjust them out. All right, I'm going to pause this and I'm going to just work. Kind of gone through and I've done my edge work. If I scrub through the frames, you can see where I've blended the edges on her face. It looks like my interiors need a little bit of work too, but we're practicing, so I'm not going to worry too much about it. I saved this. I'm going to hop back over to After Effects and just take a peek at what it looks like, and this is what we should be seeing. So you can see I've done a bunch of work on the edges of the hair and things like that. I might have missed a few frames. It looks like I missed a few right here. But this should look pretty good. And when we combine this with our footage, we'll notice like right here, this matte is looking super solid around her face and her hair. And if we shut this off or solo it, we're getting pretty good edge blending as she leaves the screen. So this is definitely on the path to work the right way for adding our 3D pod into the background and making this all work. Cool. All right, let's keep working this shot for the next hour and practicing. So I'm going to continue to just kind of go in, make selections, track them, adjust edges, etc., and move forward. Does anybody have any questions at this time? So you've had some semblance of an idea of what we're doing inside of Mocha. We worked with edges, we worked with Mocha tracking, we've gone back into After Effects and seen how that affects our shots. There we've got Meredith. She's got nice soft edges on her, and when we look at her with the rest of our shot and our fake pod put in there, you can see that we're on the right track to make the shot work. And that concludes the lecture for today.